What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm honored to introduce you all to loving mother, grandmother, foster parent, and devoted wife, ritualistic child abuse, sex trafficking, religious abuse, and incest survivor, published writer and author of the book My Life Now, Essays by a Child Sex Trafficking Survivor, podcast host and content creator on YouTube, psychotherapist, social worker, keynote speaker, writer, and director of 3 feature-length films and numerous short films, and an absolute inspiration, Mary Knight. I came across Mary's story and content about 2 years ago when I stumbled across a YouTube channel called Real Women, Real Stories. Premiering on that channel, ironically, at the same time I discovered it, was a documentary featuring Mary, where she took us on a journey of discovering if her memories were real by examining the False Memory Syndrome Foundation and its implications on the survivor movement and community through its quote-unquote false memory doctrine. Also on this YouTube channel were some question and answer sessions where Mary spoke about and answered questions from the audience regarding her harrowing testimony as a child who was pimped out by her abusive, racist, pedophilic, and incestuous parents to church and community pedophiles, or as Mary puts it in her gut-wrenching and inspiring book she authored, My Life Now, she was quote-unquote rented by the hour. I will have Mary's documentary listed in the show notes for you all to check out, along with her YouTube channel and her book, which are both incredible resources for understanding more about ritualistic abuse, familial sex trafficking, and other forms and characteristics of organized abuse. I encourage you all to check out her free videos on her YouTube channel and head to Amazon to purchase her memoir as well, and those links will also be in the show notes. Mary's work uncovering the myths and realities behind the False Memory Syndrome Foundation have been groundbreaking. Quoted from Wikipedia, quote, "The False Memory Syndrome Foundation was created by Pamela and Peter Freyd after their adult daughter, Jennifer Freyd, accused her father of sexual abuse when she was a child. The FMSF described its purpose as the examination of the concept of false memory syndrome and recovered memory therapy and advocacy on behalf of individuals believed to be falsely accused of child sexual abuse," end quote. In Mary's documentary, she actually was able to get in-person interviews with FMSF founder, as well as Elizabeth Loftus, who is involved with the FMSF and is an American psychologist who is best known in relation to the misinformation effect, false memory, and criticism of recovered memory therapies. Loftus has testified on behalf of pedophiles and predators such as Ghislane, Maxwell, and Bill Cosby. In today's episode, Mary will be doing a deep dive with us into the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, its history, founders and board members, her work uncovering the truth about memory, and the impact the false memory lies have had on survivors, therapists, and the progress being made to expose organized abuse to the masses. I ask you all to please put away whatever you're doing and give Mary your full attention as we go down the false memory rabbit hole and learn from an amazing woman who has bravely stepped up to use her voice for the voiceless and to be a light in the darkness. Before I finish introducing today's guests, I wanted to give just a couple of quick reminders and updates. If you'd like to be on the show, share any information privately with me, or send me a written testimony for my upcoming book series or to be written in a Substack article, you can email me at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com or standbysurvivors@protonmail.com. I've also partnered with a couple of my favorite brands to get you guys a couple discount codes on some of my favorite products, including Rife Technology frequency machines and blockers and CZTL's high-quality methylene blue. Treat yourself to holistic health at a better price with brands you can trust. All the rest of my links are in the show notes as well, and I'd love your support across all platforms. Thank you all for helping to make The Imagination the safest space on the internet for survivor, whistleblower, advocate, and educator disclosures. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, walking miracle, voice for the voiceless, survivor and anti-child abuse advocate, content creator, survivor, warrior, and a woman blinding the darkness with her light, the one, the only, Mary Knight. Mary, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
It's an absolute honor to have you on. I've been following your story now for a couple years and have just been so inspired by your courage getting up and talking about some of the most controversial things related to this type of abuse and confronting some of the most well-known predators that I think people try to stay away from or promote depending on sort of what side you're on. So I'm really excited to talk about your work today and what you've discovered. And thought we'd maybe start off for people who are a little bit new to your story, and I'll have your documentary and your YouTube channel down in the show notes, as well as your book, which is an amazing memoir about your life. But I wanted to start with talking about your memory recollection and what that looked like, and thought we could sort of talk about your process and what you discovered going through the confusion of all of that.
Sure. And I always like to very first start with the fact that my life now is really good. I really do. I have a really happy life. I have a great marriage. My husband and I got married in 2010, and we're really happy. I get to do lots of yoga. I get to be around children a lot. I babysit for a little girl. I have we were foster parents for a while, and one of our kids just got out of foster care on Tuesday and is living. Yeah, his new foster parents are his guardians, and so he has that stability for the rest of his life. And he and his new foster mom and me, were the three of us are going to, new guardian, she's his guardian. We're going to take a trip together to Washington, D.C. And he's a really smart kid, and it's just going to be so fun. He's 13. So, I mean, I have so many good things in my life. And I say that because when I first was remembering, it didn't seem like my life could ever get really good, and it has. So I just want to be an encouragement to other people um, as they are beginning the process of healing. And when I wrote my book, I put I made the title My Life Now. So it kind of talks a lot about what life is like for me now. Yeah, and the other things on the back. Thank you. But what it was really fun to take. Well, it was the person who did layout who picked out the picture, but the picture is me being just so happy and walking in one of the places I walk multiple times a month. I'm walking over a bridge that's over a waterfall, and I can walk to it from my house. I just have my life is happy in so many ways. Now I can start by telling about what it was like to remember. So I was 37 years old when I remembered my abuse. What happened for me is there were multiple relatives who already had remembered, but I wasn't in contact with them. My father's sister had chosen not to be in contact with him for a while, or with me. And she and I actually lived in the same city, but she didn't want to talk to me. So um, my parents came to my home. It was in Dallas, Texas. And while they were there, my dad and mom were going to see that aunt, my dad's sister. And my mom had known my dad's sister really well. They were roommates in college, my mom and my aunt. So they met, and my aunt told them about abuse. And so I was trying to ask my parents about it. My mom would keep interrupting and not let me have that conversation. So I had some time alone with my dad, and which now seems kind of scary to be in a car he was driving, but I was. And I asked him about it. He said, well, she just has some crazy ideas. Well, I knew my aunt had different opinions about religion than my father. So I said, about religion? He said, no, about abuse. She thinks our grandmother sexually abused her. So that evening, after I put my kids to bed, I talked to both my parents. I said, well, how are you going to handle this? Oh, well, we just won't ever see her again. We think she's crazy, which again seemed like, for someone who had been that close, They were in each other's weddings. I mean, so I decided after my parents left town, I called my aunt and asked if she would meet with me, and she did. And she told me about ritualistic abuse. She didn't tell me that I had been abused, but she told me that I had witnessed abuse. And I knew immediately that what she was saying was true. I felt like I just lost everything in that moment because I knew I would have to break contact with my parents. I knew I would have to give priority to the safety of my own children. And I naively called my father. I called him at work because I thought he might be more open to talking to me if my mother wasn't there. And I told him that I had, this was, well, back up a little bit. After I talked to my aunt, I was already in psychotherapy with a therapist who did hypnosis, and she was very good at it. She was a psychologist. I was in marriage counseling. My first marriage was verbally abusive, and I was just kind of starting to figure that out. And so my ex-husband said, well, since you're going to need counseling for this, we'll stop the marriage counseling, which doesn't make sense, but that's what we did. And so I went to her, and but before I did have any hypnosis, she asked me just to write down everything I could remember from my childhood, good and bad, just everything. And during that process, I remembered I had my first memory, which was of my dad holding a dog gruffly. And it was like someone was projecting it onto the wall across from the couch where I was sitting. And I could just see that hand. It was in color, and I could see the hand. So I didn't know at that point that it was my father. So I went into I did have hypnosis, and I realized it was my father's hand. And at that point, I knew I needed to call my father. So I did. So as I'm remembering, it was over a longer period of time than what I'm making it seem like, because first I went to the counselor, she told me to journal. Then I did all that journaling. I remembered a man's hand holding a dog gruffly. I knew enough about ritualistic abuse to wonder if the dog was going to be killed. I then I went to the counselor again for my first hypnosis and didn't remember anything about myself. I brought my ex-husband, my then husband, with me because I wanted to make sure that hypnotist, the psychologist, didn't ask leading questions, and she didn't. My ex-husband said that I knew everything. It wasn't the hypnosis I had was something more like just a relaxation. It was really not very different than EMDR that I've had, eye movement that I've had since, where I just was relaxed enough and in a comfortable place that I felt safe remembering. And so that was the first one. And then the second one, my ex-husband didn't go with me. He was working full time, but I brought a tape recorder, and so it was taped, and the tape of that session is actually in my film, Am I Crazy? My Journey to Determine If My Memories Are True. So that was when I remembered it was my father, and it was extremely emotional. So then I called my father and I said, I remembered him holding a dog gruffly. He said, is this going to lead you to think I sexually abused you? Which I'm like, I I don't think so. No, I had never even had that as a thought that he had sexually abused me, and he said that, and then he said, "Well, I guess I won't ever see you again." Like he's going to break all contact. So it was really an odd phone call, really a sad phone call, and I decided that my sons were supposed to go visit my parents and take a trip alone, and I decided that couldn't happen. I actually it was when you had landline, and I just took the ringer on my phone. Because my mom kept calling me and saying bad things about me and how it wasn't true. And so then I turned it back on, or turned the phone back on, and my ex-husband answered, and she said, "Oh, these bad things about me." So anyway, that was the next part of it, but still, of course, I wasn't going to have my sons go there. And my mother would try to get me back in the family in different ways, and she did until her death, which she died in a car accident in about 1996. And then after that, my dad just didn't have anything to do with me. And he did disinherit me. Um, Sadly, he disinherited me and my sons. Yeah, so it was it was really a crazy way to show he's not a child abuser, to do something mean to my sons when they had not done anything to him. But at that point, I really knew my memories were true. When I was 37, I was first remembering I had hypnosis 5 times, and that's all. After that, the memories just flooded so much that I didn't need help remembering them. I have had EMDR a few times since, and that's when sometimes it's easier, just emotionally easier, to remember something when I'm with a counselor than when I'm alone. And that's why I've done that. Um, or when I've just wanted to remember a little more and thought that would help my healing. But for the most part, almost all my memories have come, um, some in dreams, but mostly just as I'm relaxed and as I'm going to sleep, or well, sometimes as I'm trying to go to sleep and they keep me from going to sleep. And but when I'm trying to relax. And they've come to me at all different times. Once I was, I used to do court testimony for my job. I did parenting time evaluations, and once I was on the witness stand, and I was still able to testify. I mean, I am able to function even when I remember something. Um, and I know it's not like that for everyone, but I am able to. So I really knew my memories were true. I mean, I evaluated them every way I could, and I was an evaluator. I was appointed by courts as a divorce custody evaluator to determine where the children would live. And I was really good at my job. I knew how to do evaluations. And so I asked myself all the same questions that anyone else could ask me. But then when I was ready to tell my story, and I was taking a class on documentary making. I'd already made my first film, which was a narrative film. It's my fun film about identical twin sisters changing places, and it's rated PG-13, and it's my fun one. But I wanted to tell about myself in film, and so I found out that my idea of I'll just tell about my childhood in a film is not a good one, because you need something that's currently happening on screen. And I was going to do one that was all about the past. And someone said, well, maybe you could do one about your advocacy work you do now, but you can't just do one about your past. So I had that in mind. And then I was also applying to go to an MFA program, Master's in Fine Arts, on creative nonfiction at the same time, at about the same time. And so then I decided, well, I'll just focus on my writing, creative nonfiction. And I got that application all sent in. And apparently I had done well enough that they wanted to admit me, even though they said I still needed to work on my writing sample more. But my other to, I had done a statement about myself, which I'd done well on that, and I'd done another, their other assignment, but my writing sample itself, they wanted me to work more on. So I did. And I wrote I wrote an essay, Sometimes I Forget I Am White, and it's about the KKK atrocity I witnessed when I was 8 years old, and there was another 8-year-old there, and 3 adults who I assumed they were a family group because they were all Black. I don't know for sure they were a family group, but they were all killed. And I was told that first I actually got a letter accepting me, but then I got a phone call telling me to disregard the letter that accepted me. And in the phone call, the head of that department was one who called me, and she said, well, we can't admit you because you don't have, well, first she wrote an email and then I called her back, but she said, we need, for this to be considered creative nonfiction, you need proof, you need newspaper articles, arrest records. Well, no one was arrested. There were no newspaper articles. And what she told me is really inaccurate, because I know now I was writing from the perspective of my 8-year-old self, and my 8-year-old self didn't have any of that information. I included all the information my 8-year-old self had, which I didn't have the names of the victims. And the other thing I'll say is that I do consider myself a victim in that circumstance, having to see that those atrocities, those murders taking place. I've written about them in an essay in my book, My Life Now. Yes, and that essay is My Parents Were KKK Members and Pedophiles. I won't go into it more because the essay itself is very triggering, but it has all the details in it. So I finally did finish that. But after not being admitted to that graduate school program for a reason that really didn't make sense, I thought, well, am I afraid to try to get proof? Because maybe I could, hire a private investigator and go back, and try to get information about this crime that happened in 1963. Yeah, I mean, the likelihood of getting information is not very good there. So, and particularly, unfortunately, in the Black community, then, especially back then, the media coverage is still less prevalent when crimes are committed against Black people. And in 63, that was definitely the case. So anyway, but I called my husband and said, well, I think we need to hire a private investigator so I can try to prove this. So my husband, who I married in, my wonderful husband, who I married in 2010. And so this was 2013 that I asked him to find me a private investigator. Well, he started thinking about how to do that. And he said, if we're going to do this, my husband always likes to follow through with everything. He starts something, he wants to finish it. And so he's like, this could cost $50,000 because they're going to have to do a lot of research. And I thought, $50,000, I don't want to pay $50,000 because I really knew it wasn't going to end up finding anything. And so, and I will say one reason for that is one of the people present, one of the KKK people present, was a medical doctor, and it was easier to hide those deaths because of him, or probably easier to hide those deaths because of him. So anyway, I really didn't want to spend that much money on that. And if I were going to spend that much money, I'd rather do it on filmmaking. And so the next morning, I woke up with a title for my film, Am I Crazy? And I just knew that was a good title. I didn't really think that I was crazy. I didn't really just disregard my memory. I mean, I held these memories as true for over 20 years. So I didn't just disregard that, but well, maybe not quite 20 years. It was 1993 that I remembered in 2013. Yeah, 20 years. But I decided to make this documentary. I needed to do the most I could to confront myself. And so I took 2 months reading False Memory Syndrome Foundation literature. It was really a hard 2 months. I wouldn't let myself read anything else. I think I let myself read like magazines, but no other books, all their books. And during that time, I was able to call Pam Freyd, who I was able to get a hold of her. Her number was on the internet. It was amazing. And I talked to her. I asked if I could interview her. And she said yes. And that's what opened the door for my other interviews, was that I got that one with her. And she was my first interview. And I really we had to, she had had knee surgery, and so we had to wait until after she was healed from that, which is of course reasonable. And so I had called her in December, and I interviewed her, I think in March. And I was so nervous, and I tried to get myself to think that I wouldn't say anything about my sexual abuse by my mother at that interview. Even if she asked, I wasn't going to say anything about it. And I was trying to get myself to not believe my mother had ever sexually abused me. And I had body memories. I could not sleep at night until finally I said, yes, it is true. It really did happen. And then the body memories quit and I could go to sleep. And so this was even coming into that interview. But still, I thought Pam Freyd might ask me some question that would make me doubt my beliefs and make me no longer believe my recovered memories. Well, what happened was, I mean, she didn't ask any questions I hadn't already asked myself. There was nothing new that came out from it. And I mean, her arguments, well, you can see them in my film. I mean, I put all the interesting footage in my film. Am I crazy? My journey to determine if my memories are true. And then I did use some of the same duplicate footage in my film, Mothers and Molestation, a film about child abuse. But I asked Pam Freyd, why do you believe your husband and not your daughter? Her reaction, her body language is so telling. Not so much her words, but her body language. So I do recommend you see the film. I do tell about the film in my book, but there's things you just can't see unless you actually see the footage. And she signed a release, so I have the right to have the footage in my film. And the same with Dr. Elizabeth Loftus. She signed a release. And also Dr. Pancras, who's a psychologist who was on the board of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation at the time I interviewed him. And he said, he said something so horrible. That he said that even if a child is sexually abused, or he even gave the example, even if a child under 3 has to watch his parents be murdered, that child will not be affected by it because he won't remember it. It's just bizarre, so different than what is true. Children are affected by abuse that happens before they can form language. And the person who was my videographer that day said, that would affect my dog. I mean, you don't have to be verbal to be affected. So anyway, that was the start to me making my film. But to be honest, after my interview with Pam Freyd, I really didn't question my memories anymore. Because, I mean, she couldn't come up with any argument that would in any way make me question them. I and then I showed my I tried to play my the audio um, from my hypnotherapy sessions to her, and I couldn't get it playing well, and she suggested I um, transcribe them, and I did. I transcribed all of them. So then I showed the transcription to Dr. Pancras, the psychologist on the board of directors for the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, and he couldn't find anywhere that there was a leading question. I mean, he tried to say, well, this is a leading question. And it wasn't. It was it when I try to explain why he thought it was a leading question, it doesn't even make sense. He said because when the psychotherapist, when the psychologist who did the hypnosis, when I said I saw a man's hand holding a dog gruffly, she said, well, go up his shirt, go up the sleeve of his shirt. Well, that implies that he was wearing a shirt with a sleeve. That's the only leading thing. Like that doesn't even that didn't cause leading for me. And I still don't really know if my father was wearing a shirt with a sleeve, but I do know it was my father. When I got to my father's face, that's when I knew for sure it was my father. So yeah, they couldn't even find any leading questions. And I'm so glad I have the hypnosis sessions. And when I was going through them, I was just in awe with how good that psychologist was. She was so comforting, she was so kind, and she was not in any way leading. So yeah, so that kind of brings us to I made the film. I I was really thankful to get the other interviews I got. Dr. Elizabeth Loftus, I have heard from someone who interviewed her that she did not like the way she thought she was misled. Well, I told her I'm a survivor of abuse, and it was really clear on that. And I told Pam Freyd, I'd already had the interview with Pam Freyd, but somehow when I got there, she's like, oh, well, you're a recanter, right? I said, no, I think, I believe my memories. And so I don't know how she could say it was misleading, but she signed a release and I can use hers. But she doesn't like how she came across. Of course she doesn't, because I caught her being dishonest. And so that I really like for people to see that footage. Yeah.
I thought that was pretty interesting too, watching her body language also. You could tell she was not used to people asking her a question that went against what she said, or just that might be sort of that devil's advocate. She's used to people babying her and just going along with what she said. And I loved that you were so gentle too with these questions that you were asking. It wasn't like you went in and were really aggressive. Like, you were very sweet and kind. And I don't even know how you did it, because when I was watching, I felt like my blood boiling. I'm like, how can these people say this? That guy that was talking about sexually abusing a baby and how it's not going to affect them, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just want to jump through that screen and, pop him. Like, how can you say that about a little precious baby, But it was really, really well done how you did it. And I would love for
Thank you.
people to go watch it, because it's really eye-opening. This movement has really caused a backwards progress in a lot of ways, with the movement of exposing, dissociation, introducing that to the public, split personalities, as well as, how this works, to where this abuse can be so hidden, and if you could, I would love to ask you a little bit about the history of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, and a little bit about how that got started, and any more about Pam and her husband, their motives for starting it.
Sure. So yeah, as you read from Wikipedia, it started after their daughter, Dr. Jennifer Freyd, remembered abuse. And she was not in her therapist office when she remembered. Jennifer's very private. and she has not granted me an interview. She's in favor of my film, but she just is such a private person. And when we talked privately, me and Jennifer, she said, of course there's bad therapists. There's bad in any profession. I mean, there's bad teachers, there's bad doctors, there's, any profession you have some people who are good and some people who are not as competent or not as kind or whatever. But she said, why would anyone think I would go to a bad therapist? Because she was head of the psychology department at University of Oregon. I mean, why would anyone think someone like her would choose a bad therapist? She knows how to choose a good therapist. So anyway, yeah, she had remembered abuse by her father, and it's now been made public. I'm not making this public. It's already been in numerous articles that her sister also remembered incest by their father. Um, and um, and so their parents started this organization, and it was really it's really an organization that exists because people who are guilty don't want to be prosecuted, don't want to be sued in silver court. That's really the purpose of it. And I'm not saying that everyone in it is a pedophile, but I would say that many of the people in it were pedophiles. And yeah, my parents, I believe my parents were in it based on some letters I got from my mother. And Lynn Crook, talk about her. Lynn Crook wrote this book, False Memories, The Deception That Silenced Millions. She she did so much research on the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. She sued her father. Lynn's father sexually abused her, and she recovered memories. And in Washington State, you could file a civil lawsuit within 3 years of the time you remembered. And she did, and she won. It was in about 1990 that she won, and she had a sister who had always remembered. So you have to have corroborating information, and it can't be from someone who has recovered memories. So even though I have multiple relatives with similar memories, I can't do it. But she could, and she had some other she had a letter from her mother where her mother basically admits that her father did it. I mean, she had several items. Well, Dr. Elizabeth Loftus was hired by her parents, by Lynn's parents, to testify on their behalf. And she did so, but still, the judge believed Lynn and, you know, believed Lynn and believed the evidence. So her father, I think the lawsuit was like $100,000. It was a lot. It was a significant amount back then. And so then, of course, Dr. Loftus didn't like that. I mean, this is a lawsuit that, that her side didn't win. So she was interviewed, Dr. Loftus was interviewed by Psychology Today, and she lied about Lynn's court case. She lied about it publicly. She said that Lynn sued her father um, when he was sick and like disabled. No, he wasn't. He was completely healthy, at the time, and and she told, and yeah, she lied about the outcome too. I mean, and so Lynn found out about that, and she started. That is why Dr. Loftus is no longer a member of the American Psychological Association. She, based on Lynn's complaint and one other complaint, um, when the president of the American Psychological Association found out about it, he went against the rules and told Dr. Loftus that these complaints were up. And so Dr. Loftus was able to resign from the association without an investigation being done. But anyway, yes, Lynn Crook tells all about all the research she's done. She continued to research Dr. Loftus to get transcripts from trials. And so her book is so complete. And we can go longer on this interview than I had said, because I know we're just getting started. But yeah, I recommend Lynn's book. And Lynn she had a bad fall recently and had surgery, which she's recovering from, so she couldn't be here today. But she wants to give away her book, give away a PDF of her book to any of your listeners who would want one. And so I'm going to give one to you, which you can send out to as many viewers as contact you asking for it. It's so well researched, and it's got some details in that are so shocking. One of the things in it is that while the False Memory Syndrome Foundation says to survivors, well, you can't prove it happened, they believe when someone recants, then they expect the recanter, the person who used to say they had recovered memories of child sexual abuse, and then later says those memories were false, they expect those people to be believed with no proof at all of anything. And so there were two recanters who, there was a film made about them, Search for Satan. And that film is currently on Real Women, Real Stories YouTube channel. And that's the same channel that my film has gotten millions of views, well, about 2 million views on in all. But anyway, this film was just put up like 5 days ago. Yes, and the woman, Mary Shanley, between those two, that's Mary Shanley. So she recanted. In criminal court, her mental health professionals they had to face charges in criminal court, could have put them in prison for many years. Mary Shanley ended up not being, she ended up on the witness stand admitting that they did not implant any memories. She could not remember even one memory they implanted. Lynn Crook tells all about that in her book. And it's really just amazing, the things that were said. And that, yes, this is Lynn Crook's book. It's on Amazon, but also if you want a PDF copy of it, that can be sent to you through an email, just ask for one and you'll be sent that. And this is Lynn. I talked to Lynn recently and she wanted to make that available to all of you. It's the best, it's the most complete information. And it's called, of course, False Memories, the Deception That Silenced Millions. And people who talk about false memories are still trying to silence survivors like myself. So I think it's really important to know. But that trial was just, I mean, for these mental health professionals who had tried to help survivors, including Mary Shanley. And the film about Mary Shanley does not include the fact that she had been hospitalized in other facilities previous to that. She had a history of mental illness, and it has other false things about her in it, making her seem like this victim, making her seem, I mean, the film doesn't include the fact that she was unable to, under cross-examination, continue to recant, continue to say that these memories weren't true. I understand from Lynn that this film, The Search for Satan, has footage in it that is supposedly of Mary Shanley in when she was hospitalized that is not. It's actors. It's it's an extremely misleading film. So yeah, if you do want to see it or not see it, whichever way, but you can make comments, and I have made some comments. So yeah, there's comments saying how bad the mental health professionals are, and we need to get some others up there. There's one I did. This film is not based on facts. And then I quote from Lynn's book, where she was at the trial, at the United States versus Peterson trial, and where Peterson and 4 other mental health professionals were, they might have had to spend the rest of their lives in prison for diagnosing patients with dissociative identity disorder and billing through the mail. So Lynn was at the 3-week trial, and she saw Mary Shanley being cross-examined, and the fact that Mary Shanley was not credible on the witness stand, and the mental health professionals were credible on the witness stand. So I encourage you to look at our book, and you can make comments. So we have some pro survivor comments on that page. You can see my film on Real Women, Real Stories, Am I Crazy? But you can also see it on my own YouTube channel. So if you put in my name, Mary Knight, and YouTube, you will get to my channel. And one thing I'm doing now is I'm interviewing people. You see the Irani father-daughter incest survivor. I interviewed her about her recovered memories. I have now interviewed 50 people who have recovered memories. I've interviewed them so you can see for themselves how credible they are. And yeah, you got my playlist up for that. And if other people want to be interviewed, you can let me know. I am continuing to interview people.
And what I love about this too that you did is most of your content is short, aside from some of the documentaries and some of the longer, but very palatable. So for people who might not have time to listen to long interviews, this is a really great place to get a lot of information in a short period of time from very credible people, like Mary was saying. And you can learn about this because it's really scary how many therapists, how many people in society, how many supporters and advocates of survivors have no idea about recovered memories, have no idea about dissociative identity disorder, and have no idea really about how trauma affects our body, you know, right down to thinking, like how we were saying, that a 2-year-old can go through extreme trauma and just forget about it as if it never happened. Like we're just these, you know, non-conscious creatures in a sense that don't have emotions. Like that's basically saying a baby's a psychopath, you know, like psychopaths can watch stuff and not be emotional towards it. And that's not how a baby is, you know? And so Elizabeth Loftus, what they have done to combat the survivors coming forward, it's made a lot of people not want to come forward because that's what therapists tell them is you're lying. This has to be fake. You have an implanted memory. You have a fake memory. And that can be so scary for somebody to come forth and hear that when they finally get the courage to actually speak about what they went through.
Right.
You know, and there was, I forget which guest it was on your documentary, but I remember, I think it was the former Miss America. She had said something like, if you can't believe a grown woman, how can you ever believe a child? You know, and I got chills down my spine. And so I wanted to ask you, Mary, in your research, What was your conclusion about memory? What did you learn about memory and how it's stored, and how and why do we have a repressed memory?
We have delayed recall because we do not feel safe enough to remember. And we recover the memory when we do feel safe enough. Uh, I um, I was 37 when I felt safe enough to remember, and I just didn't feel safe enough before. I was frustrated with myself. I hadn't remembered sooner. I would have liked to have remembered before becoming a parent, but that's not how my life worked. And so I've now compassion about myself about waiting that long to remember. Lynn Crook remembered at age 45. And so you should never be frustrated with yourself for not remembering sooner because there was a reason, your mind had a reason to wait. Um, and recovered. I had Dr. Bezel van der Kolk. I got to interview him. That was such a treat. That was pretty amazing. I remember the day he agreed to that, and I was so excited. Yeah, he made a comment about Dr. Loftus that he wouldn't put on camera, but anyway, he's not a fan of Dr. Loftus. I can just say that. Um, and so he tells more about memory, and his book, The Body Keeps a Score, is good about telling about memory. I have a chapter in my book that I have two chapters that were written by other people, and one is about recovered memory. It's just an explanation of recovered memory written by Anna Holzman, and she's a recovery coach. So I like the way she explains it. Also, my prologue was written by Maria Sokoloff, who is also a survivor with recovered memory. And she explains about herself and explains her explanation of recovered memory in the prologue. So, yeah, I don't consider myself necessarily an expert on it, but I know for sure, for absolute certain, that my memories are true. I really knew it all the time, and I but I forced myself to confront it more because there was just this little bit of doubt. It wasn't like I really thought I was crazy, but there was just this little bit of doubt that my memories might not be true. And now that doubt is completely gone, which is really nice and relaxing, and just knowing, sure, I wish it wasn't true. I wish my parents weren't horrible people, but that's how it is. And I really have a good life without, well, my only biological relatives that I have contact with are my sons and grandchildren, and then one cousin, the cousin who appeared in my film. Um, so, but it's possible to have life outside of your biological family. And I will mention now that that I tell about my family in one of my essays. The essay is titled Family, and so it tells more details than I share in any other way because I was very careful how I wrote it, and with uh, still giving people privacy. And one more thing that just occurs to me I want to say about my book is that I have trigger warnings on each essay. So if you want to read only the ones with low trigger warnings, please do. That's what my yoga teacher did. And then you're still reading most of the book, and just skip the ones with high trigger warning. There's 3 with extremely high trigger warning, and they are very triggering. And then there's maybe 4 with the medium, with like trigger warning, but it's not the extreme. So you would only miss 3 essays leaving those out, or you could leave out all the ones with the medium trigger warning too, because most of them have low trigger warning. And I do include fun things like telling about my neighbor when I was growing up who fixed me breakfast when I was really a neglected child. I'd walk to her house before I started kindergarten. And so I tell about the good people in my life, the speech teacher, because I really believe that if you help a child, even if you can't rescue the child from the situation, you can still save the child's life, and that there were people who saved my life who will never know it.
Your book is amazing. I really love how you divided it into chapters like that and gave some insight at the beginning. Like you said, they are all labeled by the trigger, how high or low it is. That way you guys can go through, and depending on your mood or what you're able to tolerate that day, you guys can sort of skip around if needed and then come back to those parts later, or just skip them all together. And you really do give a lot of insight into this. And the other thing I really love is the education piece. I love that you involved other people in your memoir to help provide their expertise on some of these topics, and that you are promoting some of the people in a sense that are the antithesis of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, people that are very pro survivor and very pro repressed memory and real memories being real versus fake. And it's a very, very well done book. And not to mention, you look so beautiful and happy in the cover, like you said too. I absolutely love it. And so that is on Amazon, you guys. You guys can just go pick that up on Amazon. I will have that in the show notes also for you guys. It's really a wonderful way to support survivors, to support their businesses, to watch their films, to buy their books. A lot of people on the other end of the screen, I know, love doing charity work or helping somehow, donating to different nonprofits. And I always say the best way that you can use your money is to pay the actual survivors to actually support their businesses and projects and books and things that they're doing. You know exactly where your money's going. You're actually supporting directly a survivor. Your money's not going into somebody else's pocket as you're trying to get it to where you want it to go. And you know exactly where it's going. And so if you guys have friends too, a lot of you probably have people in your life that are waking up to this stuff. This can also be a really great gift for another survivor, to validate them and to help comfort them, or to give to an advocate, somebody like me who wants to learn more about this and who wants to step up and understand what life is like recovering and going through something like child sex trafficking. It can be really hard to imagine some of this stuff if you haven't gone through it. I still have trouble after all these years doing interviews. I still have trouble comprehending this level of abuse and imagining it, and so this can be a really great educational tool too if you guys have therapists or advocates or survivors in your life. Really beautiful way to support a survivor, and then also a great way to gift yourself or somebody else with some knowledge and an incredible story of abuse to being a thriver and recovering. And it really does have a happy ending. Mary's story has a very happy ending, and it brings joy and hope to other people to see where she was to where she's at. So I can't thank you enough, Mary, for all the work that you put into this. I know that this had to have been a big undertaking doing this book.
Thank you.
And
And
for
I
people,
will say it's available at independent bookstores also. So it can be ordered um, from any independent bookstore.
and they can also, from what I understand, get this from your book too, or excuse me, your website too, right? If they want to go to
Yeah,
your
yeah.
website.
On the home page, you can, yeah, Mary Knight Productions, and you can go there and just click. That's an easy way to find it. And not all my films, but many of my films are there. If you just get to maryknightproductions.com, then you can get to all my work. The film tab will lead you to some films. And yeah. The other thing about my memoir is the longest essay is how I healed. I used to have fibromyalgia, and I was in pain. I was in pain every day of my life. I just thought everyone was. And then when I realized what it was, I went through a lot of process to heal. And that some people get the book just for that, because if you have chronic pain, um, you want to figure out how to get out of that cycle. And I will say I'm so healthy now. I'm really, really thankful for that. I'm more healthy than the average 69-year-old, which is how old I am.
You don't look it. You look so youthful and young and just vibrant. You have such a beautiful energy to you. And so I'll have all these links, you guys. And Mary, my last question, I appreciate you sharing about your book and your process behind it. And like I said, I encourage you all to go get it or gift it to somebody. But my last question before we finish up today would be, if there's somebody listening on the other end who is wondering and questioning if they're crazy, what would you say to them?
What I did when I remembered is I set a rule for myself that I could only reevaluate it twice a week because it would ruin my day when I did. Because really, I knew my memories were true, but so it was like Tuesdays and Thursdays I could. And then I got down to only on Tuesdays, just once a week. And on the other days, I went, okay, I'm not even going to go there, that maybe these memories aren't true, because it would just tear me up inside when I was thinking that. So, set some limit for yourself, get a good psychotherapist. I hope you can. I do have some in my book about how to go about finding one, but I know it's hard to find. But when you find a good one, it's so worth it. Um, but yeah, get support. Um, and the other thing is that I say, and this is about getting well physically or emotionally anyway, is think of your recovery work as a part-time job. So not only do you have whatever job you have like I recently talked to a client who's I'm now a practicing psychotherapist again. And but I only see people who live in Washington State. Um, but I said, like, you're going to school full time, you have a part-time job, but your other part-time job is recovering from your chronic pain. And so consider that a part-time job, and give yourself credit for all the work you're doing that helped me in my recovery. So I could, instead of saying I didn't get that much done today, I could say, well, I meditated this amount of time, I did yoga this, and all the things I did to recover. And because the check is in the mail, if you do your recovery work, you will get better, and just rest in that assurance.
That's really great advice. I know healing can be arduous. It feels like it should be done quick, and that's not always how it happens. So that's awesome advice to treat it like a job, something that you're committed to every day, something that you're doing. And I love that you said to give yourself credit for it, because even small steps forward are still steps forward. And it's important to acknowledge that and to give yourself a pat on the back and be proud of the work that you're doing. So thank you, Mary, for giving that advice and for coming on here today. Was there anything else that you wanted to share before we wrap up?
Oh, just thank you. This was a great interview. I appreciate it.
We really appreciate you. I've had so many requests to have you on, so it's great to finally get you on here and to share about this sort of harrowing part of our past that hopefully we can leave in the past and, overcome this false memory lie and move forward and really be behind survivors and question the perpetrators more than we're questioning the victims coming forward, and create support for them and follow them and support their businesses and books. And again, you guys, I'll have Mary's book, her documentaries, her website. I'll have my email as well. She mentioned Lynn Crook's book. You guys can reach out and email me if you guys would like a PDF of that, and I will send it to you. So feel free to email me. Again, all of that information is in the show notes. We couldn't do this without you guys. Thank you so much for listening. Bless you all, and we will see you next time.